From Ronald to Grimace and even more obscure characters, a lot of McDonald's mascots have stopped appearing in ads. So what happened to them exactly?
Ronald McDonald's colorful costume and joyful demeanor brings joy to millions. Just don't try to hug him. From a strict rule about touching to his slim, trim physique, these are the things that only adults notice about the iconic red-haired clown. Back in the 1960s, Barry Klein was doing advertising for both McDonald's and the Bozo the Clown show at the same time when he had the idea. What if he combined the two and got McDonald's to run ads during the children's show? The first McDonald's clown was a bit awkward looking, with a McDonald's cup for his nose and a hat made out of a cardboard serving tray. Ronald's eyebrows were also shaped like the chain's iconic golden arches, which is something you may not have noticed as a kid. So the look hit all the selling points, but it was also a bit too much. After Washington, D.C.'s WRC-TV canceled Bozo the Clown in 1962, Klein kept the show's Bozo, played by Willard Scott, and made him the McDonald's mascot. And yes, this was the same Willard Scott who later went on to become the weatherman for the Today Show. Klein also hired a previous Bozo, Michael Coco Polikovs, as a wardrobe consultant. The resulting costume kept the big red smile, arched eyebrows, and gloves. It also continued to feature the restaurant's main colors, red and yellow, while adding the iconic arch emblems to the ensemble. They also replaced his shag carpet hair with a bright red wig to modernize and complete the look.
McDonald's, remember, when you see my face, think of your kind of place.
McDonald's eventually dumped the first Ronald McDonald because of his size. The chain worried that if it kept a bigger mascot on staff, it would need to continue hiring large Ronalds to keep the image consistent. Is there really a shortage of big men who want to be a clown? With Willard Scott being 6 feet and 3 inches tall and 290 pounds, maybe so. Regardless, Scott was heartbroken to learn his size was an issue when it came to continuing his mascot gig. While the U.S. has laws against employment discrimination based on things such as race, gender, or religion, only Michigan has laws these days prohibiting employment discrimination based on weight. Despite being the mascot for a fast food chain, later notorious for supersizing its meals, McDonald's didn't want a larger Ronald McDonald. Instead, it wanted a mascot who could be spry and energetic in its television ads. In fact, in 2004, McDonald's started calling him a balanced, active lifestyles ambassador, dressing Ronald in workout clothes and turning him into a soccer and basketball player, according to CNBC.
Besides, regular exercise, like playing sports, can help you stay healthy. It'll be a kick!
Ronald McDonald started out as the sole mascot for McDonald's. However, from 1971 to 2009, other characters joined him in commercials for the fast food chain. If you missed the comic book series from the early 1970s, you probably felt like you were missing a backstory and wondered why the storyline included food thieves Captain Crook and Hamburgalar. McDonald's got rid of Captain Crook in 1987 after 15 years of the pirates stealing Filet-O-Fish sandwiches. However, the despicable Hamburgalar continued nabbing burgers until about 2002. Most of us never had any idea what Ronald McDonald's purple bell-shaped sidekick Grimace even was. But it turns out he was supposed to be a gigantic taste bud whose sole purpose was to remind us how delicious McDonald's food is. Roy Burgold and AJ wrote a book in 1972 called Ronald and How to help standardize everything about the McDonald's brand mascot. They offered instructions on dress and makeup as well as sanctioned behavior. Anyone who has a less than savory image of clowns can rest assured that Ronald is going to remain in character and be the type of happy-go-lucky clown that puts a smile on most kids' faces. However, one thing that Ronald will never do is hug you or your child. A brief pat on the back is the most you'll ever experience from the red-wigged clown. While hugs certainly have their advantages, we don't necessarily want them from strangers, even one as well known as Ronald McDonald. The same handbook that keeps Ronald McDonald from hugging your kids also stipulates what he can and can't say. For example, if your children want to know where hamburgers come from, he's absolutely not allowed to tell them that the meat comes from a cow. After all, this could be devastating news to a child who loves animals. Sure, it's the truth, but there are lines he won't cross, especially if it could result in a child becoming a vegetarian and never wanting to eat a McDonald's burger again. In fact, Ronald McDonald has his own type of fast food manual that provides exact answers to questions that customers might have. For example, if you ask him how much he makes playing the chain's mascot, he's directed to say that what he's doing isn't work, he's just having a good time. Additionally, if Ronald McDonald doesn't have a scripted answer for a tough question, he's supposed to tell you to ask someone wearing normal shoes, according to Yahoo. Have you ever noticed that you never see multiple Ronalds together unless they're cosplayers? You might see 10 Elvises at a time, but you'll never see 10 real Ronalds together. That's because there are strict rules explaining that only one Ronald can appear at a time. Being a local Ronald McDonald is actually not a bad gig, and it's far more complicated than you'd imagine. Once recruited through CW & Co. Productions, they had to be willing to relocate to an area that needed a mascot. They often had a chauffeur drive them from gig to gig, and even had their own bodyguard to help avoid rock-throwing kids and protesters. Local Ronalds once earned from $40,000 to $100,000 a year, depending on how many appearances they scheduled. It might be possible to find multiple Ronalds together to photograph. However, you would need to know the location of the top-secret McDonald's convention the chain puts on every other year. Sadly, nobody is leaking that information. There have been times when Ronald McDonald has appeared in multiple countries on the same day for special events. But if ever asked how he could be in so many places in one day, the company will merely insist that perhaps his magical ability is similar to that of Santa Claus, because in the eyes of McDonald's, there's only one Ronald McDonald. Back in 1963, when Ronald McDonald was still in need of a makeover, a disturbing commercial appeared on television screens across the U.S. In it, Ronald convinces a little boy to go with him to McDonald's, even though the boy knows he shouldn't talk to strangers or accept gifts from them. However, since Ronald could produce hamburgers from his magic belt, the boy assumes he must be safe.
But you're no stranger. You really are Ronald McDonald.
A commercial where Ronald McDonald kidnaps a kid certainly wouldn't go over very well today. Plus, more people have started to view clowns as creepy. When McDonald's surveyed test audiences in 2011 about commercials it was thinking of airing on television, more and more reviewers used the word creepy to describe their feelings toward Ronald McDonald. It certainly made McDonald's rethink its clown-based marketing. But is Ronald really creepy? McDonald's has been extremely strict about who could represent the chain. While the company vets each Ronald with a comprehensive background check, at least one creep has slipped through the cracks and into the role. In 1998, Joe Maggard, a substitute for Ronald for one of the chain's commercials, turned out to be a bad hiring choice. Maggard was arrested on a weapons charge and went to court again the next year for making prank calls as Ronald McDonald. While Maggard certainly falls under the creepy category, he's definitely not the norm.
I don't have much hair. Ronald's got great hair.
Unfortunately for Ronald's reputation, sinister clowns started appearing in random locations worldwide in 2016. The first reports came from South Carolina in August, and before long, disturbing clowns were popping up everywhere. People were seeing them walk down deserted stretches of road into the countryside or through city lots both day and night. While many were just dressing up for fun, others tried to lure kids into the woods, ran at people, or brandished real weapons to incite terror. As a result, there were several clown arrests in 2016. However, the only Ronald McDonald believed to have been arrested that year was a statue version that was blocking foot traffic in Guangzhou, China. If you started to notice Ronald McDonald disappearing from sight in 2016, it's because of all the rampaging clowns. Terry Hickey, a spokeswoman for McDonald's, told CNN, McDonald's and franchisees in local markets are mindful of the current climate around clown sightings in communities, and as such are being thoughtful with respect to Ronald McDonald's participation in community events for the time being. However, Hickey also went on to assure fans that Ronald McDonald wasn't going anywhere, telling CNN, "This does not mean that there will be no appearances by Ronald McDonald, but that we are being thoughtful as to Ronald McDonald's participation in various community events at this time."
Hey, this is great. Good times.
1974 marks the year when McDonald's first joined forces with a children's hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to provide a place for families to stay while their sick children received medical care. Today, Ronald McDonald houses are in 60 countries and regions worldwide to help relieve some of the emotional and financial stress for the worried parents of ill children. Even though Ronald McDonald hasn't shown up in McDonald's commercials since 2016, he still remains the face of Ronald McDonald House. Representatives for Ronald McDonald House call him
the CEO of happiness.
In this role, Ronald McDonald still visits ailing children in hospitals to try to bring brightness and cheer to them as they undergo treatment. Plus, many of the fundraising efforts the charity uses to raise money each year, like Red Shoe Day, continue to use Ronald McDonald mascots. So if you see a Ronald on a street corner asking for money for Ronald McDonald House, you know he's there for a good cause.
McDonald's has certainly changed quite a bit since its humble California beginnings in the 1950s, and a great deal of that change has happened just in the last decade or so. They've removed many of their playgrounds, spent $6 billion on making their restaurants more high-tech and sleeker looking, and done everything under the sun to create a menu that appeals to fast, casual, loving millennials. One of the more nostalgic aspects of McDonald's that's faded away has been the burger chain's long-standing clown mascot, Ronald McDonald. The absence of Ronald McDonald is bound to split people into two groups. There are those who will view Ronald's firing from the McDonald's of today as yet another piece of their childhood gone forever. On the opposite side of the coin are those with more of a good riddance attitude about it. So why, after so many years of promoting Happy Meals, did the Golden Arches finally pull Ronald McDonald from its promotions?
McDonald's hamburgers? And some French fries?
Ronald McDonald has been McDonald's main mascot since the 1960s, but his presence was wearing thin before those terrifying clown sightings of 2016. Various watchdog groups had been criticizing Ronald's marketing of unhealthy fast food to impressionable kids for years, drawing comparisons to the long-retired cigarette mascot Joe Camel. Long before the creepy clown incidents, former CEO Don Thompson attempted to defend Ronald as a mascot, saying in 2014, "You don't see Ronald McDonald in schools. You don't see him eating food." Basically, the message seemed to be that Ronald doesn't eat McDonald's food. He just sells it. Many observers thought the defense didn't do much to help Ronald as a mascot or McDonald's as a place to eat. That same year, the company redesigned the clown with a cooler, more sophisticated look, but whatever they were shooting for, the rollout was a flop. McDonald's has been going through a makeover to make its restaurants more appealing to adults for years. The company started this makeover in 2012, and they're still in the process of updating its 5,000-plus locations. This means self-order kiosks, refreshed exteriors, and dining rooms that take inspiration from cafes and coffee shops. But the turn away from the kid-friendly burger joint design is a problem for Ronald, whose loudly dressed cardboard cutouts don't really fit in with the new modernized aesthetic. McDonald's could always bring Ronald McDonald back whenever it likes, but these days, if you look through the company's social media accounts, you'll see that they're almost totally Ronald-free. This doesn't mean that Ronald McDonald has been 100% erased from the brand. You can still see Ronald McDonald representing the Golden Arches at least one day out of the year in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. McDonald's has been flying a giant Ronald McDonald balloon in the parade for years, and it continued to do so at the parade in 2019. Ronald's parade appearance that year wasn't exactly smooth sailing, though. Poor Ronald suffered a gash in his leg after being blown into a tree branch. The deflation got so bad that NBC cut away to pre-recorded footage from an old parade to save Ronald the embarrassment.
Anyone who grew up in the 1970s and beyond probably remembers McDonald's colorful McDonaldland-themed advertisements. What you might not know is that McDonald's essentially stole the entire idea for their Fantasyland. By the late 1960s, people realized that children were a perfect target for advertising, as their undeveloped brains could be easily manipulated for quick bucks. So in early 1970, McDonald's came up with the idea of using the popular characters from Sid and Marty Krofft's hit TV series HR Pufnstuf in order to sell fast food to kids. Phone calls were exchanged and the Kroffts received an official letter saying the deal was going forward, and that they would be paid for their work. However, later that year, the Kroffts were abruptly told that the plan had been scrapped. Except, of course, it hadn't been. In 1971, McDonald's unveiled their wildly popular McDonaldland, a fantasy realm filled with weird burger-themed creatures and puppets. The ad campaign was a massive success, leading to McDonaldland-themed playgrounds around the country and a surge in sales. One problem, though. The concepts and characters in McDonaldland were almost completely ripped off from HR Pufnstuf. Especially egregious was Mayor McCheese, whose design was almost identical to HR Pufnstuf's titular dragon other than having a fluffy bun for a head. Needless to say, the Krofts sued, and that's when things really got interesting. As the lawsuit played out, the depth of McDonald's perfidy became apparent. Not only did McDonald's appropriate the basic concepts of the HR Pufnstuf characters, they actually hired away the Krofft employees who had designed and built the HR Pufnstuf characters to begin with. In fact, McDonald's went so far as to even recruit the voice talent from HR Pufnstuf to do the voices for the McDonaldland characters too. The Kroffts' lawsuit wasn't just about the theft of intellectual property, though. Thanks to the massive McDonald's marketing machine, the McDonaldland characters quickly became so popular that they pushed HR Pufnstuf out of the market. The Kroffts lost a number of merchandising and licensing deals as companies turned to McDonald's instead. Case in point, the Ice-Capades, which replaced the Pufnstuf characters with the McDonaldland gang. Once the lawsuit went to court, one of the more unique aspects of the trial is the fact that it was more about how children perceive things than how adults did. The Crofts argued that while adults might know the difference, little kids being marketed to wouldn't understand that the McDonaldland gang wasn't actually part of their beloved Saturday morning HR Puffinstuff show. So the usual legal burden of copyright infringement was superseded by something far less common in lawsuits: common sense. Even though McDonald's argued that they had changed enough small details to make their characters legally different, the courts didn't buy it. As the text from the case notes, "We do not believe that the ordinary reasonable person, let alone a child viewing these works, will even notice that Puffinstuff is wearing a cummerbund while Mayor McCheese is wearing a diplomat sash." In 1977, 6 years after the battle started, the courts found McDonald's guilty. But did they really lose? In the end, McDonald's was forced to pay the Crofts more than $1 million in damages, including $6,000 per commercial, $5,000 for each promotional item made, and $500 for other infringing acts. They were also ordered to stop using certain characters and to stop airing commercials, running promotions, or selling items that featured those characters. Over the following years, the McDonaldland characters began to fade in popularity, but by the time the lawsuit was finally completed in 1977, the goal had already been accomplished, and the damage done. HR Puffinstuff has been relegated to a footnote of history, mostly notable for sneaking references to hippie drug culture into kids' television.
Jumpin' Jehoshaphat, we've been drugged.
Characters like Grimace, the Hamburgalar, and Mayor McCheese, on the other hand, are still part of America's cultural lexicon and help turn McDonald's into a worldwide phenomenon.
Les Miserables, rubble.
And when you put it that way, $1 million seems like a bargain.
He was a burger-loving, moon-headed man who enticed you out into the night on top of his flying piano. And for a time, he was loved by many. So why did McDonald's send him packing? Mac Tonight was a character featured in McDonald's commercials from 1986 to 1989. Despite his brief stint in the limelight, the moon-headed singer, with his trademark sunglasses, beaming smile, and stylish tuxedo, has left an indelible impression.
Check out those shades.
The Mac Tonight character and campaign was an innovative and memorable part of McDonald's advertising history. The surreal-looking mascot has been portrayed seated at a piano on top of a giant Big Mac, atop a cloud, and even on a roller coaster. These dreamlike settings, coupled with catchy jingles, added to Mac Tonight's appeal and helped to cement him as a beloved icon of America's 1980s fast food culture. Mac Tonight was retired just a few years after he hit the spotlight, but he remains one of the most fascinating fast food mascots out there. Since McDonald's characters like Ronald McDonald and the Hamburgalar are typically aimed at kids, Mac Tonight was an anomaly. Instead of advertising the chain's fare to families, the moon-headed crooner promoted the idea that McDonald's was about much more than just daytime dining.
I love Macca's every night.
And we all love the nighttime value.
McDonald's $2 dinner deal.
That's value! Mac Tonight was one of only a few McDonald's mascots that didn't appear in McDonaldland, a series of commercials in a colorful, fictional universe used by the chain's advertising between 1971 and 2003. Older McDonald's fans might remember Speedy, who came before Ronald, and younger fast food fans will be familiar with Happy, the Happy Meal box. Mac Tonight had a smooth and enigmatic demeanor, and he was definitely a departure from the typical colorful style of McDonald's advertising. Mac Tonight was the brainchild of an LA-based advertising agency, Davis, Johnson, Mogul, and Colombato, also known as DJMC, which created the character after McDonald's executives asked the firm to help them increase the chain's evening sales. The first 4 advertisements featuring Mac Tonight cost $500,000 to make, and while the spots initially aired only in California, the advertising proved highly effective and was soon expanded to Oregon, Las Vegas, and Phoenix. The Mac Tonight marketing campaign was so successful that McDonald's executives decided to roll it out across the country in 1987. The launch of the nationwide campaign was marked by the mascot's appearance at a McDonald's restaurant in Boca Raton, Florida, where he performed on the building's rooftop. AdWatch reported that consumer recall of McDonald's advertisements doubled in the month after Mac Tonight hit the national airwaves.
At McDonald's all over the Bay Area, the Moon Man will be serving up fun for everyone. Maybe he'll even teach you to dance the Mac Tonight Trot.
Before Doug Jones appeared in things like Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy, and Star Trek Discovery, he portrayed Mac Tonight. Doug Jones wore the huge moon-shaped mask and played the character in several advertisements that ran on American television. Peter Katroulis, former creative director at DJMC, told Mel magazine that Jones was chosen for the role because he was tall and thin, and he had mime experience.
Like my nephew, the mime. Hello?
He was highly animated, which was essential for the Mac character, making Jones a perfect choice. Jones credits his stint as Mac Tonight with paving his way to success in movies like Hocus Pocus. In 2013, Jones told Collider that he played Mac Tonight in 27 commercials over a 3-year period, which led to several referrals. Perhaps this is why Jones ended up coming back to do 2 Mac Tonight commercials in the mid-1990s, during a short-lived revival of the character. McDonald's Mac Tonight campaign was set to the melody of Mac the Knife, which is a pretty unusual choice considering that the song's original lyrics are about violence and murder. The song was first written for the Threepenny Opera, a 1928 German number about a man named McCheese and his violent acts. In 1959, a version of the song by Bobby Darin became a #1 hit in the US. Since it was the song's catchy tune that played a role in its selection for the Mac Tonight advertising campaign, the song's lyrics were repurposed into a PG-rated jingle, and instead of talking about bloody murder, the new lyrics celebrated the joys of late-night snacking. McDonald's rejected the accusation that Mac the Knife was not suitable for use in advertising. The corporation's national marketing vice president, David Green, defended the chain's decision to use the tune, saying that it was just representative of the music of the 60s. Mac the Knife was definitely well known by baby boomers who grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, when it was a chart-topping hit. Ironically, the catchy melody of Mac the Knife also may have ultimately led to the character's downfall. In 1989, McDonald's discontinued the campaign after the son of the late Bobby Darin sued the fast food franchise for over $10 million. The lawsuit alleged that the Mac Tonight marketing campaign had infringed on Bobby Darin's singing style and mannerisms. While the lawsuit was unsuccessful, Mac Tonight never regained his former level of popularity after taking a break. Peter Kucherlis summed this idea up best for Mel magazine, saying that while McDonald's had the rights to the song, the brand didn't really put up a fight. According to him, if Mac had been as popular and lucrative as Ronald McDonald, the company may have fought harder. Decades after the popularity of Mac Tonight had dwindled in the US, the character resurfaced on the opposite side of the globe. In 2007, the crescent-faced musician started appearing in McDonald's ads in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and the Philippines. This time around, however, the mascot was no longer an actor in a foam mask, but rather a CGI character. The chain's Southeast Asia campaign was short-lived, ending in 2010. In the newer commercials, Mac Tonight exchanges his piano for a saxophone, which he can be seen playing on the rooftop of a McDonald's store, and sometimes playing soccer or in other unusual situations. Mac Tonight, just like Ronald McDonald, was more than just a television character. The dreamlike mascot also sometimes made appearances in stores to the delight of McDonald's customers. When the Mac Tonight advertising campaign went nationwide, the character appeared in front of 1,000 people at a McDonald's store in Florida. To satisfy the demand for Mac Tonight, McDonald's started placing animatronics of the mascot in some of their restaurants. Just like the original Mac Tonight, the animatronics would usually play the piano and sing. However, maintenance of these animatronics ceased after the mascot was retired by the franchise, leaving motionless figures at various outlets. One of the last Mac Tonight animatronics can be found in a McDonald's outlet in Orlando. Visitors report that the robot still plays music, but no longer works. Despite his short tenure as a slinger of late-night beef treats, Mac's impact on pop culture is pretty legendary. In an episode of The Simpsons entitled Kiss Kiss, Bang Bangalore, Homer enlists the help of a Mac Tonight cardboard cutout to watch over his family after he's transferred to India for work. Mac also makes an appearance in Burger King's, where he sings in Homer's dreams to persuade him to take a stance against a fast food restaurant owned by Mr. Burns. His memory has also lived on in NASCAR. At least twice, NASCAR teams adorned their cars with a Mac Tonight paint scheme. The first instance occurred back in 1997 with driver Bill Elliott, who was sponsored by McDonald's for 5 years, starting in 1995. The NASCAR Hall of Famer's blue-clad number 94 car featured Mac Tonight and the McDonald's logo on the hood. Elliott would go on to drive the vehicle in a handful of races that year. Nearly 20 years later, the Mac Tonight car came back. In 2016, driver Jamie McMurray adopted the same paint scheme for his number 1 car when he raced in the Bojangles Southern 500 at Darlington Raceway. The vintage design choice was not entirely out of the blue, as the race took place during the venue's second annual Throwback Weekend. Remember Pogs? Mac Tonight also appeared on a series of Pogs distributed by McDonald's restaurants. Mac Tonight masks were sold, as well as finger puppets and Happy Meal toys. Unfortunately, Mac Tonight fell victim to the darker side of the internet in 2007 when racist images and videos featuring Mac, now referred to as Moon Man, started appearing online. Moon Man was appropriated to propagate hate, and the Anti-Defamation League has classified the Moon Man as a potential hate symbol when used in a racist context. They caution, however, that Mac Tonight shouldn't automatically be construed as a symbol of hate, since he has such a long and mundane legacy as a burger mascot and 80s icon. Sometimes we just can't have nice things.
Why did McDonald's decide to ditch the beloved character Captain Crook? Did he steal one too many fish sandwiches? Did his abrupt 1980s makeover come under fire?
I can't stop! 2 cheeseburgers to go! No McDonald!
We know you have questions about Captain Crook, and we have answers. Here's everything we know about his disappearance.
Avast! I'll fix the rascal.
Stop! That's not the way.
Hold it! I'll put it under arrest.
As you can clearly see, Captain Crook was a pirate through and through. With his puffy shirt and lavish purple hat, he gravitated towards a very classic, very casual pirate look, and as you can see for yourself, he wore it very well indeed. Of course, he didn't happen to have a peg leg or wear an eye patch, but hey, nobody's perfect.
I'll trade you 2 Big Macs for a Captain Crook.
You're not worth it.
Oh, yeah?
When your name's Captain Crook, you're probably not going to grow up to become a beacon of respectability.
Oh, my.
He was searching for a great treasure.
Oops, my mistake.
This particular captain had a voracious appetite for mischief, a hunger only exceeded by his love of the filet-o-fish sandwich. Well, someone out there had to be eating them. Without a doubt, Captain Crook hung with a rough crowd. First, there was the Hamburgalar, who devoted his life to stealing hamburgers and cheeseburgers. Then there was the evil Grimace, he of the craven and insatiable thirst for milkshakes. Meanwhile, Captain Crook himself was a force to be reckoned with, demonstrating with every sly move that one man's fish sandwich is another man's buried treasure. If Captain Crook looks familiar, it might be because he looks an awful lot like Captain Hook, the villain in Peter Pan. You know the one we're talking about. The similarities are impossible to ignore. They both had a penchant for wearing large floppy hats, velvety red jackets with lace popping out of their collars and cuffs, and of course the obligatory curly moustaches that are always so fashionable among the villainous pirate set.
He even walked the plank.
Buster! This looks like a good spot.
However, it's worth noting that Captain Crook wasn't missing a hand, unlike the iconic villain who liked to give Peter Pan such a hard time. We can't help but wonder whether Captain Hook would have also enjoyed the filet-o-fish had he been born into a different era. What do you think? In the 1980s, McDonald's gave Captain Crook quite the makeover.
Let's both work together and get this boat in the water. Right, but first, a filet-o-fish sandwich.
Seemingly overnight, Captain Crook transformed into a far sillier pirate with a much more bushy moustache. He looked less like a villain and more like someone's cuddly, vaguely swashbuckling second uncle. For reasons we'll probably never understand, the powers that be at McDonald's decided to drop Crook from the pirate's name, and he was promptly renamed the Captain. Instead of being psychotically obsessed with filet-o-fish sandwiches, he spent a good chunk of time enjoying pleasant lunches with Ronald McDonald or hanging out on his pirate ship's lifeboat. For a minute back there, it looked like the captain had finally come into his own, but fate is some cruel stuff. Sadly, this revamp wasn't enough to save him from a massive overhaul of the McDonaldland cast of characters in the 1980s. In the middle of the decade, many beloved residents of McDonaldland were dropped from the chain's advertising campaigns, including Captain Crook.
Aye, it's a different kind of sandwich. And a great treasure.
How's the story end?
So why did McDonald's let the captain go? Perhaps it was a simple and dispassionate marketing move. We've reached out to the pirate for a statement and will update this story as soon as more information becomes available.
Ahoy! How about a cheeseburger for me?
Oh no, Captain Crook, not till you learn to smile.
Oh, really? Watch this.
Ronald McDonald's greatest nemesis, the Hamburgalar, was a fast food icon. So why did this cheeseburger-stealing villain suddenly disappear from McDonaldland? Let's find out why this bamboozling burger bandit was ultimately relegated to the pop culture dustbin.
Good morning, class.
Good morning, Ronald.
Today's subject, the Hamburgalar.
As you can see, the original Hamburglar wasn't particularly appealing. No wonder he was revised in 1985 and given red hair and smoother facial features to make him look more childlike and cartoonish.
Touch, cheeseburger. Touch, rob a big cheeseburger.
Nope, still creepy. In 2002, the Hamburglar made a rare appearance in a McDonald's commercial that wasn't specifically tailored to kids. He popped up in an ad alongside tennis legends Serena and Venus Williams to promote the chain's dollar menu offerings. As The Atlantic reports, this was the last commercial to feature the Hamburglar mascot as we knew him. What a bummer! The Hamburglar's unceremonious end may have reflected an overall downturn in fortune for McDonald's. In 2002, the company's stock fell by 39%, and the chain lost more than $435 million in value. McDonald's responded to the stock tumble by closing numerous locations and cutting a large swath of jobs. The next year, the fast food chain set out to thoroughly rebrand itself as an establishment that offered more sophisticated and refined fare. In order to make that happen, something evidently had to give. Around the same time, McDonald's conspicuously began downplaying its McDonaldland characters, including the Hamburglar.
I don't know what you are. What you say about my mama?
Huh?
By their very nature, ad campaigns tend to have a rather limited shelf life. After all, companies certainly don't want to run the risk of their products seeming old-fashioned, outdated, or woefully out of touch.
The last fry.
Play for it.
You better catch up.
That was so funny I forgot to laugh.
With that in mind, the Hamburglar had a good long life. He somehow managed to terrorize our television screens and steal an ungodly amount of burgers for 30 solid gold years. But near the end of his illustrious career, he was starting to seem rather old hat, particularly since it could be argued that he was dressed to somewhat resemble the Lone Ranger, a radio and TV show that was popular with kids back in the 1950s. As Time magazine reports, a generation of viewers that came of age in the early 2000s may have just found the character to be straight up creepy, which of course he was.
Ronald, the hamburgers got the cheeseburgers!
Got a train to catch. I'll head him off, but fast.
By the 2010s, the Hamburglar was gone, but not forgotten. In fact, the character eventually re-entered our lives, though in a freshly updated form. When the Hamburglar re-emerged in 2015, he was suddenly a tall, handsome, stubbly gentleman who looked rather fetching in his Hamburglar-inspired threads. There was the long trench coat, the striped shirt, the eye mask, and the brimmed hat. So what was this all about? As a McDonald's marketing exec told Mashable, we felt it was time to debut a new look for the Hamburglar. After he's been out of the public eye all these years, he's had some time to grow up a bit and has been busy raising a family in the suburbs. And his look has evolved over time. Not only had the Hamburglar grown up, but so had his tastes. McDonald's used the updated character as an attention-getting, limited-time-only mascot in order to promote its adult-oriented sirloin third-pound burger in a series of online advertisements. Who could ever get enough of that sweet little face?
Why, it's that crafty old Hamburglar stealing all those delicious McDonald's hamburgers.
What do we do?
You may not know that Ronald McDonald's big purple pal Grimace was once named Evil Grimace, as he roamed around McDonaldland hoarding milkshakes and other beverages before taking on a more friendly demeanor. Here's the dark truth behind this creepy character. Even a marketing juggernaut that can convince kids that prefab hamburgers are better than fresh ones can still be prone to mistakes. And one of those mistakes was the four-armed Evil Grimace. As former McDonald's creative officer Roy Burgold wrote in QSR magazine in 2012, the original Grimace was scaly, mean-looking, had 4 arms, and had no charm whatsoever. He scared kids. We changed him to a soft, plush, 2-armed blob of a sweetheart who only wanted McDonald's milkshakes and to hang out with Ronald. Evil Grimace was obsessed with stealing milkshakes from children. If you're an adult, you might find that darkly funny. But when you were a little kid, you might have actually believed that your frozen treat would be stolen by a 4-armed purple blob. The historical record has not been kind to Evil Grimace. Business Insider dubbed him a total failure, while the think tank YouTube channel made an astute point in a 2016 video by noting, they realize that in a story, you have heroes and villains, but in ads, you don't necessarily want people to be scared of being killed by a monster when they go to your place. First impressions really are a big deal, and the first impression we get in one particular commercial of 4-armed Evil Grimace is a scene of him standing in a dark cave, surrounded by McDonald's cups, asking the camera,
Who's there? Where's the Coke?
If this were a person that you were meeting for the first time, you would probably immediately delete his number from your phone and avoid him in social situations at all costs. But in McDonaldland, this first impression is a reason to invent a fake beauty contest to lure this Coke-hoarding monster out of his cave, and then take all the Coke back while he's gone. Actually, now that we think about it, this scheme might work in real life as well. The entire point to this story is that in addition to stealing milkshakes, Evil Grimace was also a Coke fiend, which created gloomy days in McDonaldland. They were so gloomy, in fact, that the first scene of this ad features a couple of kids sitting in a field of hamburgers with Ronald McDonald, whining about how they have no Cokes and no shakes. And by the tone of their voices, it sounds like they've lost their entire will to live.
No Coke, no shakes.
Evil Grimace wasn't the most intelligent citizen of McDonaldland. Case in point, in most of the commercials he appeared in, he was duped by a giant clown with simple disguises. In one of them, Ronald McDonald throws on a hat that says mailman and puts a bag of letters on his shoulder, thereby posing as a mail carrier to deliver Grimace a fake letter inviting him to participate in a beauty contest. You might protest that that's a federal crime, but in McDonaldland, it's just a crafty method to get your triple thick shakes and ice-cold Coca-Cola back to McDonald's. Not one to learn from his mistakes, Evil Grimace is again bamboozled in another ad when Ronald spots him absconding with 4 arms full of Coke and milkshakes. The clown throws on a beret and a pair of oversized sunglasses, grabs a fake movie camera, and follows Grimace to Filet-O-Fish Lake. He then convinces Grimace to pose for some shots, getting him to slowly back up before falling into the water. You might think that Ronald should now be tried for attempting to kill Evil Grimace, but in McDonaldland, it's perfectly justifiable to behave this way if you're rescuing milkshakes and fountain soda. Although most of us probably remember Grimace as purple, he was also known for becoming green on March 17th. This was at least the case for the lone St. Patrick's Day that 4-armed Evil Grimace was with us when he starred in a Shamrock-themed commercial. In the ad, a couple of concerned children notice that Grimace is turning green and ask him why his hands and feet are severely discolored. Grimace, who looks a little like a scientific demonstration on the progressive effects of frostbite, then tells the kids that he often turns green this time of year, thanks to McDonald's Shamrock Shakes. The little girl asks Grimace if she can have one, as she's never had a green shake before, to which Grimace replies that she sure can. For a brief moment, it appears that the 4-armed villain will actually show some compassion for the kids, who seemed so concerned for his health. But he then reveals his true colors when instead of handing her a triple thick Shamrock Shake, he instead shakes her hand and yells,
Sure, shake!
Despite the evil moniker, the original 4-armed version of Grimace wasn't so much evil as he was just kind of dumb and hungry. In a way, he was like a dog who rips the Christmas roast off the counter while it's defrosting. He's not trying to ruin Christmas. He's just looking for some lunch. This is clear in the movie director commercial, in which Grimace repeatedly says how thirsty he is. And this is ostensibly why he's running off with 4 armloads of beverages. Evil Grimace is a fairly big guy after all, so he probably needs more hydration than the average 7-year-old. Similarly, when he's spotted turning green from Shamrock Shakes, the poor dumb oaf doesn't even realize that his body is changing color until the kids tell him. And perhaps he actually did think that the little girl was asking to shake his hand instead of asking for a Shamrock Shake, as his brain was both frozen and addled with sugar. In that sense, he wasn't evil. He was just too dumb to know any better. Though this personality trait was never publicly cited as a reason for his name change, we can't help but think McDonald's ultimately figured out that they got the evil part wrong. Once upon a time, a playground at McDonald's was as much a part of the Golden Arches experience as a burger and a Happy Meal toy. The McDonaldland Play Place debuted in 1972 at the Illinois State Fair and expanded to McDonald's locations nationwide, with everything from Officer Big Mac climbing structures to Captain Crook spiral slides. The pieces were designed by Don Amend, who was previously a set designer at Disney before working for McDonald's. By the early 90s, the playgrounds branched off into an independent concept called Leaps and Bounds, an indoor play center where parents paid $4.95 to let their kids immerse themselves in McDonaldland. There's no evidence of Evil Grimace at Leaps and Bounds, but he was part of the original lineup that debuted at the Illinois State Fair. The playscapes included the Evil Grimace Bounce and Bend, a 10-foot structure on which children could hold onto the bars while the cage shook back and forth. According to a post on the Dinosaurs and Dracula blog, the Bounce and Bend attraction was still at some McDonald's restaurants into the 1980s. The McDonaldland characters were naturally enough turned into toys, and most of the original ones featured posable limbs and changeable cloth clothes. Many also included accessories, like Officer Big Mac's badge and Mayor McCheese's sash. They also had levers in their backs that allowed kids to move their heads in 4 directions. Alas, this wasn't the case with the evil Grimace toy, as his design lent itself more readily to cuddling. Its innards were similar to the material found inside a beanbag, and it was covered in purple fur to make him especially cuddly. Grimace wasn't winning any action figure fights, but he was perfect for sleeping next to in bed. If you want one of these cuddly evil Grimace dolls now, that's probably going to set you back a pretty penny. A recent asking price on eBay for a rare Comic-Con exclusive stuffed 4-armed evil Grimace that's still in the box was $129.99. But hey, free shipping was available. Who's to say if it was actually worth that much, but either way, it would definitely be a nice conversation piece to have sitting on your living room sofa. And it's way cooler than an enamel pin, which you can find on eBay or Etsy for about $15. Though there are no public records of parents avoiding the Golden Arches because of the imminent threat of a 4-armed monster, in 1972, McDonald's decided to figuratively amputate 2 of Evil Grimace's arms. Also removed was the evil part of his name, as he henceforth became known as simply Grimace. He retained the dopey persona, as he still began each sentence with a duh, and maintained his unhealthy obsession with milkshakes. As Grimace went from foil to cartoon clown hanger-on and gave up stealing from kids, he turned into Ronald's best friend and got all the Coke and shakes he could by hanging out with a guy who had them in abundance. His story is actually a decent life lesson, as Grimace's new lifestyle was certainly better than pursuing a life of crime. Also, we'd argue that a 2-armed purple blob is much more aesthetically pleasing than a 4-armed monster.
Grimace, we're late, but the dinner's great.
Why did McDonald's get rid of Officer Big Mac? Was there a beef between him and Mayor McCheese? Did he have to turn in his badge? All these questions and more are about to be answered. Here's the real reason McDonald's left Officer Big Mac in the dust. Even in McDonaldland, there was a need for law and order. It came in the form of one man, a certain Officer Big Mac. You'd often find him patrolling the streets of McDonaldland, making sure everyone was kept in line.
You really think he'll make it to McDonald's? I hope so.
Was he a good cop? Unconfirmed. He was pretty effective at keeping the Hamburgalar and Captain Crook at bay, so there's that. As the 70s began, the hamburger chain sought to hook kids early. McDonald's beckoned them under the Golden Arches with a cast of theoretically lovable characters. Among the McDonaldland gang was, yes, a cop with a Big Mac for a head. A clever marketing campaign for a sandwich that had been introduced only 4 years earlier. Officer Big Mac was somewhat reminiscent of the Keystone Cops, an inept, purely fictitious police force from the silent movie era. Miami was a rough place in the 1980s. The international drug trade had made the city the murder capital of America, and the rampant crime inspired classics like Miami Vice and Scarface. Even Officer Big Mac fell victim to the seedy city. According to Thrillist, a 5-foot fiberglass version of Officer Big Mac mysteriously went missing from a Miami McDonald's in 1983. A group called NPLO claimed responsibility for the crime. Perhaps NPLO was a ruthless drug cartel. Perhaps the name stood for No Pickles, Lettuce, Onions. Details have been lost in the sands of time. The ransom note demanded 40 billion Big Macs and 40 billion plus 1 French fries. The request was ignored, though it sounds very delicious. This particular statue of Officer Big Mac was never seen again, but we imagine that someone out there knows something. If you or someone you know have any details about the missing Officer Big Mac statue, please notify your local McDonald's at once. One of Officer Big Mac's more memorable relics was his playland structure, widely known as the Big Mac Climber. According to a 1999 story from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, over 400 children were injured as a result of this thing, which led to skull fractures, broken bones, and concussions. McDonald's reportedly didn't report the injuries and instead just phased out the Big Mac Climber, and the chain was investigated by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. The result was a $4 million fine, the largest fine the CPSC had ever assessed at the time. In the mid-'80s, McDonald's phased out some of the lesser-known McDonaldland characters. One of the casualties was Officer Big Mac. No official reason for the move was given, but theories abound. Some people suspect that McDonald's axed the characters that most closely resembled the creatures from HR Pufnstuf. According to the TV Tropes website, the 1985 discontinuation of these major characters were the result of the lawsuit we mentioned earlier. Whatever the reason, Officer Big Mac, Captain Crook, and the Professor were no longer welcome in McDonaldland. We do wish them the very best of luck in their future endeavors, and please contact your nearest McDonald's if you have any questions. Have you ever checked the Officer Big Mac entry in the McDonald's fandom wiki? We check it first thing in the morning for updates, and we can confirm there's one great theory as to why the character was ultimately retired, which says he was a crooked cop, often letting Hamburgalar and Captain Crook go due to them paying bribes to him. It is believed that he started a sentient burger trafficking ring. The post goes on to say that the death of Officer Big Mac was the result of an unfortunate shootout with Mayor McCheese, allegedly the result of a bad trafficking deal. He's listed as survived by a widow and 58 children, all of whom we presume are absolutely devastated and absolutely delicious. After 26 whimsical seconds of children running hand in hand with Ronald McDonald through a forest of trees filled with eyes and apple pies, one 1970 commercial for McDonald's colorful McDonaldland gives a nod to the head honcho, Mayor McCheese. Mayor McCheese's character is exemplified in a 1971 McDonald's commercial about him running for re-election. In his bumbling speech, he consistently requires Ronald McDonald to correct him. Ronald has to recommend the word trustworthy instead of Mayor McCheese's strange use of self-winding to describe cheeseburgers. Ronald also shoots down his idea for a cheeseburger in every glove compartment.
Well, McCheese has been re-elected. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
By the late 80s, however, Mayor McCheese had disappeared while Ronald McDonald enjoyed popularity into the next generation. The only time the beefy politician is seen again in McDonald's approved media is in the 2001 time-traveling episode of the direct-to-video miniseries The Wacky Adventures of Ronald McDonald. In the episode, Have Time, Will Travel, the gang finally manages to arrive at a McDonaldland after bouncing around several different eras, except it's the McDonaldland in 1975. Upon seeing them, Mayor McCheese presents the latest dance craze, the hustle. After this brief dancing cameo, Mayor McCheese is left behind as Ronald McDonald, Grimace, and the Hamburgalar return to the then-present year of 2001. Despite McDonald's deposing him from office, Mayor McCheese as a character has enjoyed his own status as a pop culture figure within the demographic of people who were children in the 70s. He appears on Family Guy a few times, always making fun of the fact that his head is a cheeseburger. He also appears in a Robot Chicken sketch as a sordid politician. Plus, he was a guest on Late Night with Conan O'Brien, playing a Scientologist who defends his beliefs while denouncing both psychology and antidepressants. Although the intended humor of these appearances varies, it's interesting how the bumbling politician from the childhood of the people who wrote this material has become an icon separate from the rest of the McDonald's party. Ronald McDonald is inseparable from McDonald's to this day, but when Patton Oswalt shouted on Twitter that he'll support Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, or Mayor McCheese in the 2020 presidential election, it highlighted the enduring memory of the incompetence associated with this retired mascot. Still, fans remain fond of the iconic McDonald's character years later. McDonald's seems to still harbor affection for Mayor McCheese too. In August of 2020, McDonald's approved a Funko Pop's figure of Mayor McCheese. Apparently, legal troubles don't plague McCheese's memory as long as it's packaged as nostalgia.